This is a tea plantation in Nuwara Eliya, the heart of Sri Lanka's tea country. This is where the tea that we love in Europe is picked by women there. They're Tamils of Indian heritage, and they work all day picking half their body weight in a day's picking for about €4 a day. As you drive along the roads that wind through mountainous central Sri Lanka, you'll see the hills are cloaked in a uniform lush green. These are tea bushes, and they've brought a lot of wealth to the country from the colonial period to now, quenching our global thirst for this refreshing hot drink. But the industry hasn't necessarily brought wealth to the tens of thousands of workers who still pick the bushes by hand in their brightly coloured saris that make it look, from a distance, as if technicolor moths have descended on the green fields. Ashika Gunasena is the Assistant Country Director at Care Sri Lanka. She gives me a basic introduction to the tea industry here.
Nearly 95% of the tea pluckers, those that actually pluck the tea, are women. So there are about 498 estates that are managed by private plantation management companies and some by government. But everywhere, majority of the workforce are women.
Let's take a closer look at these fascinating women. This is a starkly traditional industry with some of the structures of the British colonial period eerily surviving. The British shipped a whole new community to these hills with a different language, Tamil, and a different religion, Hinduism, into an area that was predominantly Sinhalese and Buddhist.
So these are people that were brought in by the British to work on the tea estates of Sri Lanka. Because the Sri Lankans refused to work on the tea estates, the result was that the British brought people from South India to work on the tea plantations, and they were brought in basically as labour. And they were kind of confined to these tea estates. They were given this barrack-type housing.
This meant that after independence, the community of so-called tea Tamils was viewed as foreign and separate not only by the Sinhalese Buddhists who lived in the hills, but also by the Tamils of northeastern Sri Lanka, explains travel writer John Gimlett.
They speak a different dialect, they're a different caste, so they don't really relate at all.
For decades, these so-called tea Tamils were even denied the rights of citizenship, an injustice that was only completely rectified in the year 2002.
There was a lot of activism from the outside of the estates as well to say, look, these people are also citizens. And at one time they were given the choice to either go back to India or stay in Sri Lanka. And some of them left and went back. But many decided to stay because generation after generation has lived on these estates.
So that's an introduction to the world of a tea plucker. Next, we'll look at their poor working and living conditions, described sometimes as Dickensian, and we'll look at hopes to improve them. Care Sri Lanka's Ashika Gunasena mentioned the barrack-like accommodation where the Sri Lankan tea pluckers have lived for generations. In a throwback to the colonial times, these are called the lines. The housing here is often grim-looking, sometimes well over 100 years old, and it's usually found a long way down dirt tracks far from the eyes of most tourists enjoying the luxurious romance of the tea estates. But a visit to the lines can be an eye-opener to the harsh realities behind the world's favourite hot drink. The houses are often dark and cramped, several generations can share one sleeping room, and food is cooked on open fires in ill-ventilated rooms. Respiratory diseases are predictably common. Travel writer John Gimlett.
Really, they're kind of like a Victorian slum that's not really changed very much since they were built, from the 1870s onwards. Conditions are very, very simple indeed. And these are some of the lowest paid workers in Sri Lanka. It's a very, very tough existence for them.
So, low pay for hard work in the tea fields, under a harsh tropical sun, its power magnified by altitude.
It's extremely hard work. They are plucking tea from about 8:30 in the morning till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they have to pluck a certain number of kilos of tea in order for them to get paid a certain wage.
At the moment, this hard graft will bring the pluckers around 700 rupees per day. That's about €4.20.
The reason why it's set at that price, it's to do with the industry, it's to do with what the companies have negotiated with the trade unions. But there is, of course, a lot of discussion and debate in Sri Lanka at the moment about making this a living wage.
But tea companies based in Sri Lanka struggle to compete with those in Kenya or in parts of India. And they say that's because rather than being too low, labour costs in Sri Lanka are actually relatively very high.
If you talk to the companies, the argument they provide is, so you get this daily wage and you are provided with housing, electricity, water, and they get some sort of a food supplement as well. So when they calculate that whole package, they consider that to be a living sort of wage.
But as we have already seen, a visit to the line shows the money isn't allowing for a particularly dignified life.
It's not enough necessarily to make ends meet. They are not able to cope, obviously, as you can imagine. They are caught up in a cycle of debt.
But perhaps things are beginning to change. There are moves underway to make the tea industry more ethical.
If you look at the tea buyers right now who is sourcing from Sri Lanka, there are many that are saying, we need for you to be upholding ethical standards. And then if you do that, we will certify that. And then therefore, they are creating a sort of a niche market for ethically produced tea. And some companies who are actually genuinely very interested in transforming that worker management relationship, they are taking quite proactive action to change the way that workers are treated. And as such, the ethical tea is gaining some ground, but I wouldn't say that it's significant yet.
A lot depends on the success of this niche market. If tea companies can treat their workers with respect and still turn a profit, there is hope the standards will become more mainstream.
I'm hoping that will catch on, and then more and more companies will begin to realize and then start changing the way that they work, because honestly, the tea industry is at stake. If they don't create a workplace that is dignified, if they know they are going to lose the young people. Right now, average age of a worker on the tea plantation is about 35, 45. So therefore, they have an aging worker population that's going to be retiring very soon. And you have young people who are not willing to work. So they need to shift the way that they treat these workers.
In the end, it's all about respect.
The work that we do with some of the companies is really about understanding how the tea industry as a whole begin to look at the workers from a point of view as being not as a liability, but as an asset and part of the production system, and as such, be treated with respect, be treated equally, and really consider issues of wage, really consider issues of dignity, because for many people on the estates, the issue of dignity is primary.